Okay. Cool. So episode 6 of the Haunted Hacker podcast. It's like time is just flying by. We have Greg, who's a good friend of mine from the UK, Canada, via US, via. We spoke together a couple times in Europe on the same stage. Really good speaker. So we're just going to have a normal podcast, relaxed, casual conversation. Please try and save your questions to the end. Let Greg do his thing. And just a little bit of background on how I met Greg. So we were both speaking at NISC, which is a Sapphire sponsored event. I believe it was in England, right, Greg?
It was in, it was in the Northwest somewhere, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we both spoke and then got put at the same table with the CEO and the founder of the company, which was really odd, and found out that we had like more in common than just sharing a stage and hacking. So I'll let Greg talk about, state of the industry, whatever he wants to talk about, and we'll just go from there. All yours, Greg.
Cool. Yeah, it's good seeing you again, Mike. It's been a while.
Absolutely.
It's weird that you're stateside now because everyone kind of got disconnected because of COVID. No one could meet up anymore, and then all of a sudden people are in totally different places.
Right.
Like I was actually going to open up with the same thing. Like we met at NISC, so it's really dark. I don't know if you guys can even see.
Yeah, you're good.
It's late and the lighting in here is crap. We met at that NISC conference. I think it was in Cheshire somewhere.
Yeah.
Which funny enough is where I live now, but I can't remember where it was. I'd have to look it up. And I remember it was like a 3-day conference. I think on the second night there was a kind of a dinner and a black tie thing, which you obviously had a hoodie with a fucking bedazzled skull on it. Awesome. But hey, Kevin Fielder was just in his short t-shirt and tats hanging out, so yep. Everything goes. It was Annabelle who was the CEO you mentioned of Sapphire, and she orchestrated the whole thing. She was actually brilliant. We had no idea at the time, but she orchestrated the whole thing. And it turns out we had quite like a similar story.
Very.
And, I used to be in, when I was like 16, 17 years old, I was in Millworm, which, anyone that was around like in the late 90s hacking scene.
Stroke.
There were a lot of groups back then. I remember like Rhino 9, Masters of Downloading, guy involved with them called Chameleon, Mark Mayfret. He founded EI. He's their chief hacking officer. You should be a chief hacking officer for someone someday. I think that's like your perfect career thing. Not the CISO role, the chief hacking role. That's what you need to be doing.
Yeah, for real.
So many ridiculous things. I remember there were like hacking for girlies, HFG. Ashtray Lumberjacks was another cool hacking group at the time. I was with Millworm, and we used to do stuff with Ashtray as well. Most of it was on Undernet, on IRC and FNet. And we were just dumb kids learning how to hack and sucking up knowledge and getting into trouble. And ended up hacking a nuclear weapons facility completely by accident, if I'm honest. I hacked it, and I only found out what it was afterwards when I plugged the IP in a browser. Like afterwards, I think it was running an old version of SendMail. And I basically got it. It was like a dead letter exploit. And like, if you didn't configure it right, well, SendMail had this feature where it would send undeliverable mail to a file. Except I managed to trick it and change the file it delivered the mail to etc password. So I just sent an undeliverable email with a UID, GID, and a hash that I knew, and I tricked it into having the system's own SendMail push it to the password file, and just created myself an account on the system, some random system on the internet. And once I got access to it, I put it in the, Netscape at the time browser.
Oh my God.
And next thing you know, I was like, it's a nuclear research center. I was like, oh shit. Let's download all the emails and deface the website and do all this other cool stuff. So, ended up moving to the States a few months after. It just felt like that's where all the scene was. And yeah, visited by some men in suits not long after that. One of them from the Immigration Naturalization Service, because that's the only thing they could pin on me. So I ended up doing some like all kinds of weird stuff, to be honest. And those are stories I don't really want to share them like super publicly. You know, one-on-one is all right, but super publicly, no. And it's stuff that like a lot of people don't believe you.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no, you couldn't have done that because you didn't have the clearance. Well, like, the government doesn't give a crap. They make the rules. They have the ways to bend the rules, you know. Yeah, you'll get a humanitarian visa for this, an excuse for that. We'll classify you as a CI here, an informant there, a witness here, whatever it takes to make it work. They're happy to bend the rules. You know, U.S. Attorney's Office giving you letters authorizing extra legal activities with no scope whatsoever.
Right, very broad.
Go run some ops. Just tell us what you find. Here's some money. No one believes that stuff. And then we actually started talking. It's like you went through much of the same stuff. I was like, holy crap, someone actually like relates to what I've been through. Yeah, so that was kind of where we connected.
And then we both had a connection with Stroke from Millworm, who originally
exactly. Yeah, we actually knew one of the same people. You know, I never even physically met him.
I did it. It was very strange. He was an electrician at the time, and he ran Millworm, and he was from Texas, in the middle of Texas, middle of nowhere, and was super surprised his appearance. Like, totally didn't expect it. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I had a similar thing. Can I up my audio a little bit? I can't. I'll try to get closer. Someone. I remember meeting like other people from the scene, and they're like totally not what you'd expect. You know, like one guy worked at a car wash. Another guy was, you know, a radio guy, or so many of these guys, they just worked at like Comcast at like the help desk, and just completely random jobs. And then at night, they're just like, you know, some of these people actually like specifically being mentioned as threats to national security.
Yes. And
meanwhile, you know, they're working minimum wage on the Comcast help desk during the day. Working in a car wash, you know, all kinds of really random stuff. But it was cool back then. It was, you know, it was before 9/11. I think I got like the tail end of you get caught, you get a job. And after that, it was like you get caught, you go to prison because you're a terrorist, right, even though you're just a teenager goofing around. Yeah, so that's kind of it's weird. I've been reflecting about this recently. That's kind of where I started out. I think a lot of people even back then were very like focused on, you know, specific kind of offensive skills, where I was maybe not as, I was always in awe like a lot of the guys, because they were like so good, you know, they were coding, you know, they weren't just like scripting Bash and Perl and C and coding C, but, you know, assembly on like multiple different architectures. And then like, I was like, holy crap, like these guys are like way smarter than I am. And I was like in awe of them, but I realized later on that they were actually they were smarter, but they were smarter in that area. They were like really focalized, whereas I was always more of a bit of a generalist, which I think is serving me better playing defense now. But what surprises me nowadays is like most people in security don't have that background. You know, they've never hacked themselves. They've never looked at it that way.
Yeah, it's kind of learned. Now they have all these certifications that teach people how to hack.
Yeah, but they've not gone through it themselves. They've never had the mentality, the thought process.
Right.
And that's kind of what worries me. And I actually had a talk last week, and I was talking about why standardization is a bad idea. And I actually remember being at that NIST conference, and there was a guy from, it was like the Chartered Institute of Information Security, and he was saying it was the only organization that was recognized, you know, by the government, by the Queen and everything, and how they wanted to standardize everything. I was like, if you're standardizing the thinking out of it, like you just take a step back and look at what you have in front of you, because it's going to change whatever you're doing, defending time of day, you know, time of year, whatever, you have to fix what's in front of you. You stop trying to standardize the thought out of it. And that actually really, really pissed me off. I thought that was like a terrible idea.
It was horrible. Yeah.
So I was like disagreeing with the skills gap and everything. And I'm like, you only have a skills gap because you've standardized the approach and it doesn't work and you're just throwing bodies at it.
Exactly. And I try to tell people that, like when I went on to the tour the first time, I did Inside the Mind of a Hacker, right? So there's a whole psychology behind what we do that you can't teach in a class.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
I remember seeing your first talk at, it was in Manchester when I first saw you actually speaking at the Future Cybersecurity.
It was at the Manchester United Stadium.
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but that's the one. That's what I thought was interesting about it, because you were really going into like the psychology of it, and everybody else, nobody had actually spoken about that before. Just the kind of thinking and why you were doing it and what was motivating you. And I never really gave it much thought. I was just a bored teenager and I lived way out in the country and had nothing else to do but play Descent. That was a cool game. And hack stuff, because why not?
Exactly.
And so I think as a topic, Netscape, Jim Clark. He founded Silicon Graphics as well, didn't he? Jim Clark.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how did you go from being involved in hacking and one of the biggest exploit databases on the planet to going to a CISO position and leading defense teams?
Well, I don't really know, to be honest. It all just kind of happened. I remember, is that an old fashioned that you're drinking?
Sort of. It's Fireball and Evan Williams with cinnamon Jolly Rancher.
Damn. Because I remember doing like a few years of, Ryan Williams is like, nice. I remember working for the government for about 3 years, and then 9/11 happened. And then I was being asked to do stuff that I was just like not comfortable with. Plus there was a lot of like political stuff going on. And I decided, okay, let me go get a real job. And I remember I got a job with this consultancy, and they told me I was going to do one thing, but that fell through. And the first day they dropped me off on an Air Force base, and they told me, this was in the Netherlands, and they told me to audit the National Defense Network because it had lost its accreditation to operate because of a previous audit. And they just dropped me off there. And I was 20 years old, and I literally did not know what the word audit meant. I didn't have much of a work ethic yet as well. So I think I spent 80% of my time with an infrared connection to a Nokia phone over GPRS on IRC chatting. But whatever, I just sniffed around the place. I found issues and I recommended, well, this is how you fix that. And I even built them like a Linux box with like Sam Hain and all the different functionalities that they would use to fix everything. And 3 months later, they were like, this is the best audit report we've ever had. No one's ever suggested solutions before. So I just kind of started doing just consulting work through them. And then I got another job. I think my next kind of big job was I was like the security lead in the architecture group for CGI, which is like a really big, it's Canada's biggest MSP basically.
Right.
So it's like, building the security architecture for these big environments and managing projects and that kind of stuff. And it was all like, everything was a baptism by fire. That was kind of my first kind of big exposure to corporate. And I was like, well, why are we doing it this way? Why are we lifting and shifting every single customer's own stuff and just replicating it? Why aren't we doing economies of scale? All this stuff, just applying common sense. And at some point I started, a friend that worked there, so like, hey, he had another friend, they were close friends, and he was looking for a security contractor. So I basically abandoned ship and went on to contracting. I got like a 3-month contract, and it got renewed, I think 13 times at the 3-month rate. So I was making some serious bank. And that was like, your typical contracting work of, writing policies and configuring firewalls and implementing intrusion detection and PCI compliance and all that stuff. And I made so much money in those 3 years. It was ridiculous. And that's the kind of like really in-demand security work that people want, that they hire expensive consultants for, implementing that stuff, compliance policies, that kind of stuff. And that was about 10 years ago. And in hindsight, I've never made so much money, but it's the lowest value security work I've ever done. Because in hindsight, I know like, okay, we were dropping tech in, but we actually had no idea how the business worked. We didn't take into account how any of it was going to be managed, how it was going to be maintained, what the culture was. We never actually had, the big picture of how everything fit together. We were just ticking the boxes for, well, we need this for ISO, we need this for SOX, we need this for PCI. And it, like, I know now that, probably extremely minimal value. Like I guarantee you that it wouldn't have been maintained. I guarantee you that we miss things. It's crap. I moved to Italy for a while because I went on vacation for 3 weeks and I fell in love with the place and ended up spending 7 years there. Nice
Italy?
Frenchy. Yeah, I moved to Italy.
Nice.
I went on a three week vacation and ended up staying there 7 years.
Sounds like my trip to London.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because there is no real IT market there. Security, the work mentality is completely different. Totally different mentality in general. Very almost medieval. But and I ended up having to like do other stuff just to survive. And I kind of like went away from, one of the things that attracted me to Italy was cars because I wasn't really passionate about cars. I was hoping to just go into engineering of cars or whatever. Didn't work out. Ended up setting an event business. Eventually I had to get a real job. And I worked for, I set up a security program for QVC in Italy. But Italy was kind of a startup, but they didn't have much set up. So I went to all the other countries because people may not know, but you have QVC in Italy, you have it in Japan, you have it in China, you have it in Germany, UK, US, obviously, France, I think Brazil now as well. It's all over the place, but Italy was new at the time. And if I can turn the brightness up, brighten me up, check you. So I just reached out to everyone like, hey, what are you guys doing so I can align myself to it? Mm-hmm. No one was doing anything. So I was like, oh crap. Well, if I'm going to build a security program here, let me build a global one. And that's what I started doing there. And eventually they hired a VP of security, which is something they had interviewed me internally for, but they decided they wanted an American to do it. And for whatever reason, she just made her mission to get rid of me as soon as she started. Literally my first meeting with her was her having me report into someone in Germany instead of directly to her, like all the other heads. And she kept trying to get me fired, but the Italian employment laws are like, you can't fire people basically, not without giving them 2 years salary.
Same with Scotland.
And to agree with it, it's like unbelievably difficult to fire people there. And it got really weird. Like I ended up like spending like 150,000 euros to try to frame me for a crime.
Wow.
It was, yeah. I
I
bought a lot of land with the settlement.
so focusing on that same idea, what I've noticed in the industry in general is people want workers or security guys with that hacking mystique or that background, and they want to use this to boost their company, but they don't necessarily want that person. They just want the name or the background, but the trust is hardly ever there.
Yeah. I think you've experienced this relatively recently. Yeah. Well, that was definitely a PR success, but it didn't last very long. It was huge PR. I think it picked up by InfoSec magazine.
Yeah.
I think it got picked up by some financial, some like
FinTech Times. Yeah, FinTech Times. And I worked for them for like 6 months and never got paid. It was an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I've had a 5-month stretch where I didn't get paid.
That's the industry, right? Like that's the type of things that we go through. You know, they want that background, but they don't want to pay for it.
I think, yeah, especially with the hacker background, like hackers they get used as a commodity in terms of, yeah, PR and exposure and that kind of stuff. I don't think, for example, I think most hackers make, because I wouldn't consider myself a hacker anymore, but I think most hackers make not necessarily the best CISOs, but really good security researchers.
Right.
You know, guys like you, guys like Chris Roberts come to mind, you know, absolutely freaking brilliant in that focus. Mm-hmm. I'm more of like a how the pieces fit together guy. And I recognize like this guy is your researcher. Like this guy really knows, because you know, I've been there. I've been in that culture. I recognize the skills. Like I know what makes someone really, really good. Right. And that's my job, just to recognize that, get teams working together, putting it together. But yeah, and there's a lot of politics in security as well. And I think part of that is people don't really understand how security works, first of all. You've got a lot of people just kind of going through the motions because there's standards and best practices, but they don't really question why they're doing some of this stuff. But it's missing that kind of mentality of fitting all the pieces together. And I think that's why it's interesting, because I think the industry is, there's this weird dichotomy to it, and that you've got people like you who are doing like really cool, you know, tip of the spear research, or like really, really sophisticated stuff. And you're like, holy crap, like how are we going to protect ourselves against this? The reality is 99.99% of the time, it doesn't matter, because big companies are still getting breached by SQL injection and not patching 3-year-old stuff.
And companies like just recently that maintain threat intelligence and vulnerability intelligence on specific customers gets breached. And I think that was like global news just a couple of days ago.
I have no idea who you're talking about. Yeah, but have you seen their PR?
Yeah.
Like their PR is like, everyone's like, oh, they're doing such a good job, and you know, don't make fun of them because anyone can get breached. I'm like, yeah, but look at their PR. That like, I don't know what happened, although I read that someone said that there was no 0 days were used or anything.
Usually not.
There could be confusion, because maybe it was their pen testing tools that had no 0 day, but I read that no 0 days were used in the hack.
Right. Which
to me means, well, you didn't patch something, you got phished, or something, you know, another basic thing happened. But I really don't like their marketing spin on it of, we've responded to tens of thousands of hacks, and every single time you responded to one of them, you made a big whoop out of it, saying, oh yeah, it was a highly sophisticated cyber attack, nation states backed, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And now that you got pwned, it's like, unlike all those other ones, these guys were really, 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 really good. Yeah, they're so much better than you that they need your red teaming tools. No, they don't.
And usually it's an insider. Like with companies like that, it's usually an insider that leaks either a vulnerability or an open avenue to get the intel or the tools. So like shadow brokers, right? When the CIA leaked their tools to shadow brokers, that was an inside job. Yeah, the industry in general, I think, can be kind of cloak and dagger. And people getting into the industry, they learn about it in school. They read about, you know, their roles or their job possibilities in books, but they don't understand like the politics, and they don't understand what goes on behind the veil. And that's one thing I try to expose, is that there's a whole nother world within security that people don't see.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics. Like you hear a lot of CISOs, or whatever you want to call them, like security leaders, security managers, moan all the time that they don't have enough money, and they don't have, you know, visibility, and they don't get to report to the board, or the board doesn't take them seriously. But quite frankly, most of that is your own failure, because if you're in a leadership position, whether it's security or marketing or sales or finance or whatever, it's your job to create those relationships and communicate and be understood and all of this. So that's fail number one. And the second one is, I think we actually secretly love it because I've seen so many organizations where you've got, dozens and dozens of employees in the security department. You've got CISOs, you've got heads of, you've got directors, and there's big budgets going around, and, high salaries being made, and they're actually doing a really crap job, but they're so poor at communicating that other leaders, so the COO, CFO, CEO, if you're in security, they automatically dismiss you as, yeah, that's security stuff, that's mumbo jumbo, we can't understand that. And it's you can't understand it because they're really crap communicators. I've got no issue communicating security to boards. Everyone's saying, like, oh, boards don't understand risk. You've never spent time around a board, because They spend a third to half their time talking about risk. It's like topic number one on boards. So it's actually, if you're a crappy security practitioner, of which there are many,
tons,
it actually behooves you to not be understood. Because if they understood you, if it was transparent, they would realize you don't have a fucking clue what you're doing.
You're a fraud, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had, I recently got a job, but then and I was brought in there to kind of rein in a CISO that the company admitted was like a real problem. But apparently it turns out he had leverage on someone, and he got my contract rescinded.
There's a lot of that politics. There's a lot of that politics that goes around too. So if you work for one company and you become a trusted employee or security advisor, and you move to another one, if someone holds a vendetta, no pun intended, it can make it really hard for you at the next place. And I've seen that happen millions of times.
Yeah. I've had I mentioned like the QVC one. That was a good example for me. And I had the, 2 years ago, started called the Capita. You may have heard of them in the UK. Yeah. They're a massive, mostly government, but managed service provider. And they for a while on the Wikipedia page, it said Capita, also known as Crapita. Because it's so bloated and mismanaged internally. And I took over the BBC TV licensing account, and they told me the customer is incredibly difficult. There's not much work to do because it's all been outsourced back out to IBM. The customer is just really difficult. It's a customer management job. And I got in there on day one, and I'm like, well, let me see the contracts of what we've outsourced to IBM, and let me see the contracts with the BBC, the customer. And I'm like, well, what we're asking IBM to do is not what our contract with the customer says we're supposed to be doing. We're in breach of contract in about like 57 different places. And by the way, you've paid £1 million for SIEM that's not monitoring anything, literally zero. And you've got contractual loopholes that you're not even aware of, where 2/3 of the environment's not in scope, and you're telling the BBC that it is, and all this crap. And I called them like on day 2 or day 3, the client, and I said, listen guys, everything here is absolute crap. I'm not even going to bother trying to save this ship. I'm just going to let it sink and build you a new one on the shore. And they're like, fantastic. You're the first person who's on this with us and has some kind of strategy. And they were buying me beers and burgers the next day,
Exactly.
So customer relationship fixed immediately. And after 3 months, actually after 2 weeks, they approached me and they said, look, we're having not board level discussion, but executive level discussions about your job. I work for Capita, and this is the BBC saying they're worried about me getting sacked because of the sheer amount of stuff that I'm uncovering.
Nice.
So they was like, okay. And then 3 months later, things had been resolved. I discovered even more stuff, but we're finding issues, we're resolving issues. And eventually he was like head of transitions for BBC. And he said, look, we're going to go and we're going to talk to your boss, who was a divisional CISO. And we're going to talk about getting you to report directly to the managing director. So you bypass her and talk directly to the managing director because you're of strategic importance to the account. And I mentioned, okay, but what about, 3 months ago, you were saying, when I first started, you were saying like you were worried about me getting sacked. And they said, great, after everything that you've discovered and solved and resolved, they couldn't possibly be that fucking stupid. Verbatim was the sentence they said. Yeah. So they had the meeting and I was fired 2 days later. So, that's the kind of politics you see in security. Like so much of what we call security is, cloak and dagger makes it sound more interesting than it actually is. It's just a bunch of people going through the motions, but not actually doing anything of value. Running a vulnerability scan, on 1/3 of the estate when you don't even know half of what's out there, on limited ports, and then dismissing a bunch of stuff because you've deemed that we accept the risk, and then,
so I
filling Excel sheets with risk registers and that kind of stuff. The risk register is a cover your ass document, and that's it.
Oh yeah. So I actually did a report on a breach for a company, an oil and gas company, and they had been breached with targeted phishing, and the malware that was used actually went into Outlook and created a forwarding rule. So all email to and from goes to another domain, and these people were interjecting themselves into the communications and changing account numbers to theirs. So I wrote up the report, went to the CISO, and the CISO said, I can't take action on this because if I do, we'll lose our jobs. And I said, well, this is me giving it to you. It's on you. So whatever you do with it, that's you, but I'm free and clear. You know the problem. And that's another problem is people afraid for their jobs. And CISOs, I find that a lot of CISOs aren't really qualified to handle incidents or to report incidents to the board, because they can't communicate the technical level. And he was so afraid of losing his job, he wouldn't introduce me to the board. But I had like a completely opposite experience just yesterday, talking to a German company that I work for. And you'll like this, they're creating a hydrogen car. And they want me to do the security for the communications between the car, the smartphone, et cetera, and I get a free car.
Bonus.
Yeah. Silver Falcon is the model. I can't go into the name of the company or the board member, but it's a really cool concept. And I see like forward-thinking CISOs and board members more in the UK and Europe than I do in the US. I had an interview with a CISO here that had federal contracts, DoD, service provider, and the entire time he spent on the Zoom interview eating food, did no OSINT on me, had no idea who I was. And when I mentioned that I spoke, he was like, I didn't know you were a speaker. And I'm thinking, dude, you have my resume. Like, it's listed. But a lot of those guys, they don't care. They've been appointed by friends, right? They've been brought in by friends and put into a position, and they suck up the money.
I'm surprised to hear you say that you think they're more mature in the UK and Europe, because in the UK, like most CISOs are astonished at like the pay rates in the States are like 3 times higher.
Yeah.
You got salaries of $300,000+ a year.
Right.
So
but the mentality is different. The mentality is completely different than.
Yeah. I think, the American way tends to be a bit more rigid as well, right? It's just like, this is what we're going to do, and we do it. Mm-hmm. Where here we kind of, we maybe pussyfoot around a bit more, but we put a little bit more thought into it. Funny enough, I started, the situation you mentioned where they got into the mailbox and they're redirecting mails and changing payment details. I had the exact same thing about 2 years ago. And the exact same thing.
That's
and
about
like,
what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I remember while I was investigating, I was like, can you email them and have them send you the original email with the headers? Mm-hmm. And then we're like waiting for a response. And we're like, we're not getting a response. And I'm like, call them up and ask them about the email. And the guy's like, what email? I'm like, yeah, they're still in your system.
so by any chance, was the domain that the email was going to, was it a Bitcoin domain from GoDaddy?
I don't think so. I don't remember what it was.
This one was like a Chinese domain that was a Bitcoin domain that was registered through GoDaddy. And I was like, what part of that header does IT not like really get or understand? Why do I have to clean up?
Yeah, no. And I had quite recently when I was asked to have a look, and it was just a day's work, but it was, managing director's email account compromised. Emailed one of his people to make a payment of, I forget if they changed the payment details. Yeah, it was a change of payment details.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a valid invoice, but change of payment details.
Yep.
£40,000 out the window.
I think ours was like 10,000. The first hit was 10,000, and then after that, it went up to like 100,000 because we owed this company a lot of money, and the person who interjected, like, they made cash because the head of accounts payable paid it out. I was like, "Are you kidding me right now?"
Yeah. I mean, and that's my recommendation to this latest one is like, forget about the tech and the security and everything. Like, just set up a process that whenever you need to send more than 10,000 pounds, call the person up. Yeah, okay, it could be a deep fake and all that stuff, but it's still like 100 times less likely to happen.
Yeah.
So just really simple stuff. But back
simple.
to what we're saying, like, yeah, I think like a lot of people in the security space, and I think a lot of people in the security space don't necessarily know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people in the more kind of junior to mid levels, they know what they're doing, but they don't necessarily understand where they fit in the big picture. And that's fine, because that's not necessarily their job. It's at leadership level, where recently, like with Club CISO, I've gotten to meet like a lot of good CISOs, but I've come across like a lot of bad ones, like a lot. And like you said, very political, it's prestigious, they make money, there's a lot of ego involved.
Yep.
They don't necessarily understand what they're doing. They're not able to communicate. They're basically there because someone told the CEO, you need a CISO.
Right.
And that's it. And there was never that kind of communication. I'm always surprised when, like if I'm interviewing, I'm always, most CISOs that I meet, can you hear me? Because my internet connection's unstable apparently.
You're good.
So most of the ones I meet, it's like you'll have like a few rounds of interviews, and you'll have like a few technical ones, where you kind of go up the hierarchy and you talk with like the head of IT and the CIO, whatever. And then when you get to like the real levels, that's when they get nervous.
Right.
Me, the other way around. I get nervous that, like IT director or whatever is going to be like, oh no, this guy's not security savvy enough, or like, oh, he doesn't know how to script Python or whatever. It's like, yeah, but that's not what you mean. And then once I get to a COO or a CFO or a CEO, it's like, yeah, we're going to do it like business wise and this, and then we can shift that to your marketing, and then you can answer this, and we're going to build it in so you don't have to build a 50 million pound SOC. We do some basic detection and response, but do more process engineering to increase the quality and all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, this makes perfect sense to us. You're the first security person in 10 years that makes sense to us. That's a walk in the park. It's getting through the filters to actually talk to those people. And I'm just, like the book I wrote I was literally going to call it like Ransom Musings or something like that. It's just completely common sense stuff. And like the number one, I think, word I see in reviews is thought provoking. Like this, that just goes to show how freaking indoctrinated we are when like really common sense stuff is thought provoking. And that's why you see people like the hiring as well. Like everyone wants like people with 10 years of experience. And like most people with 10 years of experience in this industry are so indoctrinated. They have their heads so far up their ass, through no fault of their own, just because it's what the industry's been telling them for so long, that they're unable to look at things objectively.
Right.
And you can get like a vet who's just getting out of the military who wants to go into cyber, or some 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid who just finished college, have a completely different perspective on things. Like,
right.
Don't tell him how to do stuff. Tell him to look at something and what he thinks.
Exactly. The creativity, I think, is the biggest part. And when you talk about, like, when people talk about skills gap and people talk about, there's a shortage of workers, the problem is when they post a job opportunity for what should be an entry level and they want 5 years experience, why don't they promote within and allow someone who's already there to take that spot and then open up a junior level? I see that worldwide. Like, all the positions seem to require 10 years experience, and they're cutting the newcomers completely out.
Yeah, and it's weird. You've got no talent pipeline that way. Right. And I don't get it. I don't get it because I got into hackers because I watched the movie Hackers.
Yeah.
It's a crap movie, but Angelina Jolie's in it and the guy scores.
War Games.
So, what's that?
War Games was my movie.
War games. There you go. Angelina Jolie wasn't in that.
No.
It didn't have the same appeal. So it was literally like I Yahoo'd hacking because Google didn't exist yet. Didn't even have a computer at the time. Bought a computer, started Googling, discovered Linux, started messing around. And, a year later, literally the United Nations Security Council was talking about me because I'm a threat to national security. And the National Security Advisor as well in the US. So I'm like, how can you go from having almost zero knowledge to that level of proficiency, in a year? I'll tell you how. I read a book every week or two, and that's while I was going to school, partying and getting drunk all the time.
Right.
So clearly it's possible. If 1 week I read a book about Linux, 1 week I read a book about Windows, Active Directory, TCP/IP, routing,
Red Hat manual, installing Red Hat. Remember the books that were like super thick and had like 5 CDs to install Red Hat?
I remember like TCP/IP Illustrated. Yeah. Ironically, because there were very few illustrations in that book. Volume 1, 2, and 3, all 3 of them were like 1,000-page monsters. Reading that when you're 16, 17 years old, just because you're curious. If you read something like that every week or two, you're reading, 50 pages a day, 100 pages a day tops. An hour in the evening, you can absorb knowledge for, after a year, Linux, BSD, whatever, and I want to know how, SendMail at the time worked, how bind at the time worked, how does DNS work, how does that work, how does an HTTPS server work, how does Apache work? You just, I want to know, sed, awk, all these scripting tools and programming language and syntax, and just pick up a book and learn it. And I'm like, why do people think that this is so difficult? Why do they think you need 10 years of experience for this?
Right.
And I've just never gotten it. So when I hire for like junior, even what most people would consider mid-level positions, it's like, yeah, this kid's keen, I'll have him.
Yeah.
Or her, him, her, or even if it's an older guy, if he still has that keenness and he's curious, because I know that I went from 0 to that level in a year's time, and that's, when I wasn't playing video games or getting drunk at parties and going to school. So
right.
I might not expect you to do it on day one, but if I create the right environment where people have time to do stuff and enjoy it and can feed their curiosity as much as they want.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting point. So when I hire people or interview people, I don't look at certifications. I throw the resume in the trash, and I build a virtual network with VulnHub images and let them go at it and have them write me a short report of what they found in 2 hours. That's what I want to see. I want to see creativity. I want to see how they think, how they operate, and how professionally they can produce the product. But it seems like a lot of companies rely on bullshit certifications that mean nothing other than the fact that they know how to study for a test. And they look at your background. Oh, can this guy get a clearance? I recently had a company call me and wanted to give me a job working for DHS. And I was like, you have not done any homework as to my resume or who I am, because that's not happening.
Yeah.
But I look at the creativity. To me, I can teach a monkey to sit behind a keyboard and do what we do. But I can't teach a monkey that creativity or that mindset. And to me, that's the most important, because, I need to know that my teammates can think on the fly, and a certification doesn't prove that.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, I remember it was in those contracting days, I was getting certifications, and I was literally I was going to the testing center, and then I would take the test on the computer, and then I would, on my way home, stop at Borders or Barnes and Noble back then.
Yeah.
Pick up the book, and then the next week or max 2 weeks later, do the next test. I remember Cisco, I think it was late 90s. Cisco had
CNA or CCNA.
Yeah. It was CCNA, CCNP, which was 3 plus a CCNA. Back then they had a LAN and WAN track as well, and all this other stuff. CCDP, CCN, CCDA, CCDP, all these things, but there are about a dozen different exams, and there were more than that. They were refreshing all of them, so there were beta versions, which meant you could take them for free, but if you passed them, you still got the cert.
Right.
And I in the space of 16 weeks, got 14 certifications.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like every night reading for an hour, going through the book, and then going to take the test. I remember like my CISM test, I just couldn't be asked to read the book anymore. I still had like 100 pages to go, and I was like on the steps of the testing center in the morning. I was like, fuck it, we'll wing it.
Yeah, so I challenged SAN certs, like 5 of them in one day, and passed them. And I got put on an audit because I thought I cheated. I was like, no, your tests suck. They really suck. And so Cham is having the same problem, right? So she's studying for the CEH, and a lot of the interviews they have, they're looking for more senior people who really the jobs are entry level. Like it makes no sense at all. They want like multiple certifications, and somebody starting out is not going to have multiple certifications. You know, those are expensive, and really like certifications has become its own industry where it's renewed.
You see these diagrams now where they lay them all out. There's hundreds of them.
Yes, man.
What the hell is this?
And it's expensive. It's like $5,000 for boot camp. And
yeah, I've never done a course. I've always just bought the book and taken the test.
I've just taken the test. Screw the book.
Yeah, I remember I took. It wasn't 5, but it was the CISSP. You know how there's like the ISS, EP, MP, and AP specializations. Yep. I took all 3 in one shot with the time allowed, but the time allowed was still only for 1. So I did all 3, and I was actually the second person to finish. And the first guy that finished, he was a bit smug because he finished 5 minutes ahead of me. And he's like, "Hey, which exam did you do?" I was like, "I did all 3." So, but you know, I've let them all expire because they don't really.
They don't mean anything. Yeah, they don't mean anything. And I have people approach me on LinkedIn wanting to sell me certifications. What certification are you interested in? I'm like, none. Quit contacting me. Because it's a full-blown business now. They make money off of making people recertify and making their certifications a standard within a certain niche of the industry, which I think is totally wrong.
It's hack the Gibson. I love that. That's so old school. Yeah, it's such big business now, and you know, it goes back to that push for standardization where you have all these people who benefit from it because it's business, it's money for them, advocating that, oh, you need these skills, you need these standards. No, you just need someone who's got a freaking brain who can think.
Yeah, so we started a company in London called Cryptasec, and we had a couple companies contact us and say, "Hey, look, you know, we need a pen test. Are you guys Crest certified?" I'm like, "No. First of all, I'm American. I don't give a shit about Crest. And second of all, what does that really prove other than liability?" You know.
I remember that, and that I was going to do a talk, and I ended up adding this completely random slide to it just because of what you'd just been through. Mm-hmm. And it was like, who is the better driver?
Yeah,
I remember the guy who managed to get his Chrysler on a rooftop somewhere somehow, and then you had a picture of Max Verstappen driving an F1 car. Well, Max Verstappen is too young to have a driver's license, but this guy with his Chrysler on someone's roof clearly has a license. So according to the certification lobby, the guy with the Chrysler on the roof is the better driver. And it's just not the case.
And that was I think that was Manchester, the future of cybersecurity.
Yeah. And it was like, can you just Google someone's name? That'll tell you more than any sort of, especially when you've got the reputation you have.
So far in all of my interviews in the past, I guess 3 months, nobody has checked my background. I was on a call with a leader of a German company, and he wanted to know my background. He looked at my LinkedIn. He'd been following me for a while and saw my post. He's like, "Yeah, I'm really interested. I want to hire you. Tell me more about your background." And I simply responded with, "Just Google Mike Jones hacker and let's talk." So while we're on the phone, while we're Zooming, he's like looking it up and he's like, "Oh shit, that's you." And I was like, yeah. And more companies need to look at that because even though I flipped and I became an advocate for helping kids out and helping companies, There's other people out there who aren't like that.
Yeah.
And these companies are hiring those people without doing any kind of OSINT at all.
Yeah. I mean, you were saying earlier, like, you don't even look at resumes. I'll look at a resume quickly, but I'll a quick scan through it just to get honestly, to try and get some flavor, but I usually don't.
Yeah.
And that's why I really advocate to everyone, like, network. Like, everyone's like, what can I do? What should I be doing? And they're asking me, what they should be learning, what certifications. Forget about it. Go out and network. Go on network.
So that brings up a good point.
It's a hard manager to know who you are as a person.
Exactly. So that brings up a good point. I've talked about that as well, as like, get to know your people. So we have a lot of people who are on the podcast who are new to the industry. Some of them haven't even got their first certification. What would your advice be to someone looking to get into the to get into the industry, or someone who's looking to, maybe find some interest in a certain area? What would you suggest?
See, I would suggest getting some certifications. So just to rewind a bit on the topic of certifications, I think certifications per se aren't necessarily a bad thing. If I see someone but security is a different animal. So I think like product specific certifications, like, okay, you're certified on Fortinet or AWS or Kubernetes, or that tells, or even MCSE, that tells me you understand that product really well. But security isn't a product. So all those certifications are really generic. And that's where they missed the boat. So that's one. So I think, all the Cisco certifications I had, I think they were generally good, because if I get a job working on Cisco gear, then that's exactly what I know how to do all those things, where security is like, it's everything and anything. It's more a way of thinking than anything else. What I would recommend, it's tricky, man, because I remember like early 2000s, you get your CISSP, you get your CISA, your CISA, your CISM. That was about it. Now there's so many, and it's regional as well. So again, Crest here,
India.
India's got its own like set of security certifications. I don't even know which ones are legitimate or not.
Ridiculous.
So it's tricky. I mean, I would say maybe look at the job specs and see what people want and get it, just to get through the door. I mean, literally just to get through the door. But again, I would say ultimately it's all about networking, because if you have enough of a network, people will look you up on LinkedIn and realize, oh shit, this person's got a lot of followers, clearly knows his stuff, a lot of recommendations, a lot of this, a lot of that. In my case, published a book, does public speaking. You see content, like Lapide, where places that have done interviews with and podcasts with that advertise you. So they say, oh, this person's connected, respected, knows their shit. Then they stop asking about certifications. So that's really important. Until you reach that, then that certification is probably going to help you open some doors. When I was contracting, that's why I got loads of certifications, because people want a certification. Now, exactly what Frenchie just said. 9 out of 10 times, if you can get in the door, you prove your worth, you're fine. And again, networking like LinkedIn. I got a bunch of certifications, but it was to win contracts, basically. It was none of it helped me do my job. I mean, some of them helped, but it wasn't the security ones. Like I did I think one of the most useful certifications I ever did was the project management professional, because you learn how to manage projects, and you learn how project managers think and how projects work. And you learn a lot of lingo that's actually relevant to more kind of senior management teams. And I've actually adapted a lot of the concepts and how I build a security framework so it's more relatable to them, just to ease that communication, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the analogy I use now, and I was actually asked for 4 certifications for a role a couple months ago, and I said, I've got nothing. I used to have some, but now I've got nothing. And the analogy I always use is, it's like a driver's license. If whatever, say in the States, you're 16 years old, you don't know how to drive, you go, you take a, you get the pamphlet, a little book, you learn the rules, you learn how to drive from A to B, what the different controls do, and you learn the skills to, basically get you from operate a motor vehicle to get you from A to B.
Right.
And you pass, you take a test, and then you get your certification, which is your driver's license. If 20 years later you drive the same way you did on your test, you're a shit driver.
You're a fail.
You should not be driving that way anymore. You should have learned from experience in that.
Right.
And the guy, he was like, he laughed. He was like, "Yeah, that's a good point." And the thing I love about using that analogy is that afterwards, when the same people go and talk to other people who've talked themselves up because of how many certifications they have, they remember my analogy is like, this guy drives like a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
That's not what I want. Or he's going to do security like someone who's just barely knows what the pedals do. You have that. I think I think experience matters kind of in I don't think experience matters in tech. You either understand the tech or you don't.
Yeah.
I think where the experience comes in is more like the soft skills, how to manage your own confidence. You learn how to communicate. How things work from the tech standpoint doesn't change.
Right.
So you read it in a book when you're 16 and you get it,
right.
It makes no difference. 20 years later, it's still the same.
So the way I work it, I try to look at different exploits every week to keep myself up to date, right? Because we're getting older. We're not always going to be on top of, the newest trends or 0 days, but I try to stay as relevant as I can, developing new stuff. But I tell newcomers that, if you take time out of your personal schedule and research at least one vulnerability a week, you're light years ahead of most people.
Yeah.
Because they won't do it. They'll do what's required for the job and that's it.
Yeah. I don't get that. Like a lot of people are, I always got flack because I didn't go to college or I didn't study this stuff or didn't study.
Me too. Yep.
No, it's the opposite. I actually studied it. I researched it. I sought it out. I read the man pages. I Googled, I Wikipedia'd it.
I built it.
Yeah. You went somewhere and sat in a lecture hall for 2 hours out of the week and just took in some of what some person talked at you. You didn't do your own research. You didn't fact check. You didn't validate. I spent all the time sucking up the knowledge. You only spent some of it moaning, rolling out of bed, going to the lecture hall, and have and sticking to just what's in your textbook. You didn't go any further than that. So I think that's
a good point, actually. I look at guys.
The pace of learning, if you self-learn, is 10 times higher than if you go to university.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I actually remember, you're bringing back a lot of memories now. I remember being, I think about 20, 21 years old, and my friend, maybe 22, I don't know, but my friends were just finishing, even 20, my friends were finishing college and university, which I'd never gone to. I dropped out of high school. And they'd gone off to study for 2, 3, 4 years. And then I kind of reconnected with them when they finished. And I'm like, what you learned in 4 years, I learned 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And have been going on ever since. So it was I've literally, in 4 years, you learned what I learned in maybe 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. So going over your career and everything you've been through, if you could give one simple piece of advice to somebody that is just entering our space, knowing the trials and tribulations we've been through, what would it be?
I think I said it already. It's network. It's really network. I'd say, you have to, and I think a lot of us are introverts, so this is difficult.
It's hard.
You have to build a reputation. You have to build a brand. And this is not necessarily through experience and the stupid idea that people have that experience is a unit of time. Because as we just said, depending on how much you put yourself into it, how much you achieve in a period of time can vary hugely. You have to build that brand, and you can shortcut that by creating stuff. If you publish papers and articles or code stuff or create exploits or papers or the more you contribute, the more people will see your experience. It doesn't have to be work for someone else. That's really important. I think the beauty of that is you start creating that brand, that reputation. People know what you do.
Exactly.
You're not a security or an analyst or this or that. You're a Mike Jones, and people know what Mike Jones. He does a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a lot of this, a lot of that. It's its own thing. But because you have that brand and reputation, people know it and will grab you for those things. So
exactly.
Once you achieve that, you don't have to fit that mold of, oh, you're a junior analyst, or oh, you're a SOC engineer, oh, you're this, which we've siloed the crap out of it. I don't even know what the roles mean anymore. It annoys me. I like to make up titles just so that my people don't have one of those generic ones.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the companies I've been talking to, like they want me to create my own role, which I think is really respectable. You know, they understand the value, and they know where I can decide where I can fit in and help. And I think that's where we get to our level. But juniors, you know, definitely get your basic certification and move on from that. So Greg, yeah, for real. So where are you speaking next? I know that I speak in January in London for the future of cybersecurity. Are you speaking at that one as well?
I don't know. I'm losing track, and I keep I spoke at Black Hat, 2 days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like, I think it was on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I spoke at Black Hat on Tuesday. It was Jane Franklin who invited me like last second because somebody dropped out.
Nice.
Didn't even have slides, so just had like, here's a notepad. Wing it. Gosh, it's weird now because it's.
I want to say we do future cybersecurity in January with Frank Abagnale. I know me and Brett Johnson are doing like a podcast live for that conference, but I think either you or Kevin are also going to be on there.
Yeah, I know. So I did the last Future of Cybersecurity. I can't remember what the hell it was about, to be honest. We
actually did the one in Manchester together, and then I dropped off, and you and Kevin did one together.
No, we didn't do them. Did we do the Manchester one?
Yeah,
like last
year. Yeah. So I ran off the stage early, and Colonel what's his name, like tried to catch me before I left the stage.
Yeah. I was there, but I wasn't talking at that one. I talked to the Birmingham one. I was supposed to talk at the London one, but they didn't have the money. It was supposed to be a 2-for-1 deal, and they had me do the free one, and never did.
And that's a totally different topic. Like the I haven't been paid to speak is enormous.
Yeah. Speaking is not what it's cracked up to be, kid.
Especially now.
Yeah. I make sure you get paid. I mean, I'll happily take less money, but get paid in advance now. Yeah. And I still do most of it for free, to be honest. I don't really mind. I realize that I'm putting a lot of my time into it for nothing sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, no, I did one. No, I did a virtual one for Future of Cybersecurity a month ago, I want to say. I can't remember. And they'd asked me to do that one and another one, but then they would only confirm this one. Yeah. No. So I don't know what.
I may have one in Russia before too long, and cool. They're looking for another spot. So maybe we could share like a live conversation between the two of us for that conference.
Yeah, I'm happy to. That's cool. Yeah, Russia is an interesting one. I've not been exposed to that much yet.
Yeah. So and then the documentary coming out. Well, it's not coming out, but it's being filmed in January. I've got R-Snake on it. I don't know if you know R-Snake, Robert Hansen. He's going to be on the documentary, and I'm also extending, the offer to jump on, be interviewed.
Yeah.
then,
Sorry, Arsnake, when was he active? Because I feel like I know the handle.
You do. He's always been active. He does the web hacking. Him and Jeremiah Grossman started White Hat.
I feel like I know Arsnake from like the IRC days.
Yeah, you do.
Or somebody else had that handle.
Yeah. So I have to get a list of names together and contacts, and thought maybe you would want to jump in on that because of our connection with Millworm and stuff like that. But that starts in January. And, anything else that I can help you out with as far as like the US side, I'm more than open to.
Yeah, it'd be cool to get more exposure there, to be honest. Get the message out. Yeah. I just hope we don't all get raided again.
I'm okay with that. I live on the top of a mountain where they would have to catch me first.
I don't remember what I signed.
Exactly. Exactly. But I really appreciate you being on.
Tell people about this. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I really appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing your experience with some of the newer people, and it's really valuable. And the conversations that we have, like people getting into the industry, really need to hear. So I've recorded this. It's going to go on to YouTube and so on and so forth. But I really appreciate it, Greg.
Yeah, you're totally welcome. I don't know if you have a time limit, or I'm happy to keep talking even. But
yeah, for sure. I'm going to do the USB Rubber Ducky hack. If you want to sit on that.
Yeah, I'll sit in.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so we'll roll into that really quick, and then we can do open discussion. So I will post in the chat. Y'all stop putting stuff in the chat window for a second so I can post this. It is a document to go with what I am doing. It's really simple, but it's very effective. I've tested on several companies and they failed completely. So what we start out with, Hack5 produces a tool called the Rubber Ducky. And for all intents and purposes, it's a computer that's literally this small, and runs off of an SD card right here. And so what I did was I created a web server and hosted a PowerShell script. And we'll go over that document really quick to teach you guys how to do it. I suggest you don't do this on your company's network, but I can't control what you do. So what this does, it takes advantage of the human factor. Stuxnet, really important point here. Stuxnet was utilized, and it functioned off of a USB that was dropped literally in a parking lot. So somebody took something similar to this and plugged in a computer, and it melted down a lot of functions. And what we're looking at is PowerShell, right? So what you need for this attack is, of course, the Rubber Ducky, micro SD. We used Microsoft Windows 7 for this attack, Kali, and Netcat. And so the attack is really simple, right? We hosted a PowerShell script on a web server. It could be on the internet, it could be local on that LAN, wherever. So basically what happens is you plug in this little device, it goes out and it uses like a wget type of command through PowerShell, and it goes over port 80 to grab the PowerShell script that initiates the backdoor. That backdoor, on this example, I ran through on port 444 or 443, but you can hide it within web traffic so nobody can see it. Originally, when I did this attack, I added some stuff to it, some encryption, some AV evasion, and CrowdStrike ended up buying it from me. I can't disclose the type of stuff I added to it, but it's the same attack. So basically what happens, you plug in the USB, and it literally takes like 2 seconds for the script to run. You don't see the window, you don't see the commands, and automatically it creates a backdoor with a Netcat listener on whatever port you specified. With PowerShell, you can then go into scheduling a job where every time that computer starts, it goes back out, it recreates that session. So I showed you the board of the Rubber Ducky. And this is what the actual Rubber Ducky looks like when it's put together. So you can see like it looks like a normal USB. And again, it takes advantage of people's curiosity and really stupidity. And they'll pick up the USB. You leave it in a break room at a company, 9 times out of 10, somebody will plug this in. And before they know it, I have admin PowerShell on their system. And then you go into some of the other attacks that I went over last time with exfiltrating data through DNS or through VoIP. It's really effective. So now that you have like the rundown and the actual document, I highly suggest you go over the document, create your own virtual lab through VirtualBox, and recreate. The code is all there step by step, and run it and learn how it works, because social engineering works the best. And when you can incorporate an actual device with social engineering, 100% effective. I've never been on a pen test where I have not been effective with an actual device. I told a story last time of when I did a casino pen test, and I left a land turtle sitting on a table in the admin's office, and they happened to plug it in, and it did a WPAD solicitation, and I got all the NTLM hashes across the network, including domain credentials, and the pen test was over in one day. So follow the steps in the document, and if you have questions, email me. And I'm going to open it up for questions for Greg, for myself, and just in general. If you guys want to hear about something specific or you want to dive deeper, put it in the chat box, and I'm going to ask that everybody unmute. So.
Good morning.
Ryan.
Evening.
Hello, guys. What happened?
Hey. Mike, how you doing?
So I see Ryan asked if there's a GUI.
No, there was just a line. I should have scrolled down, man. Sorry.
Okay.
Read what
No worries. So questions for Greg.
I don't know shit, so don't ask me anything.
That's my line.
Yeah, just in case you guys are feds.
Yeah, right.
So what link are you looking for, Kim?
I think the PowerShell link is the text file's gone up the chat a bit too far.
Okay, I'll repost it. Also, we're going to put together a website. I just registered the domain, actually for $1, which was really cheap.
Nice.
And we have our graphic designer working on some of the graphics, and as well as t-shirts, right? So I'm actually wearing the prototype for the t-shirt with the thumbprint on the back. And
Kind of hard to see.
in Australia, somehow the logo ended up on the side of a building, like poster size. Not
That's
sure
the
how.
poster.
Yeah, dude, it was legit.
I saw that post. I was just scrolling through my phone, right? And I just saw the picture. I didn't see the haunted hacker little like text, and I didn't see that it was your post. I just saw this like hooded hacker kind of thumbprint thing, and it just reminded me of you immediately. Like I had no idea it was even your post or that it was about this podcast.
Yeah, so what's cool is like it's kind of like a movement, right? So you know my story. The government took everything from me, right?
Yeah.
Destroyed my identity. Stole my identity, basically just made me a zero. So the only thing I have left personally that they can't take is my thumbprint. So I'm giving it to them. Take it. You know, you're not going to stop me by taking all my info. So it's kind of started like a semi-movement of like transparency and, you know, fuck the government for what they do, especially to somebody who's a 2-time veteran. So I was really surprised. Like I woke up to, I think it was like 6 a.m. I woke up to this post of this poster of my thumbprint on a building in Australia, and I was like really shocked. I was like, that is probably the coolest thing anybody's ever done for me, ever.
Because that was a nice poster. I mean, someone took the time to make that.
Yeah, for real.
I was like, yeah, please send me the PDF.
Ryan, right?
And wasn't that poster like opposite a police station as well?
Yeah, it was right across from a police station. So not only does the police station have the visual, but they also have my Twitter handle, so they can come like querying me. And I'm like, yo, dude, I'm in the US. I don't know what you're talking about.
Brilliant, police would love you.
Mm-hmm. Police, actually, let me explain that. So the police in Europe, in UK, in Germany, absolutely love me. Police in the US, not so much. FBI US, not so much.
Talking about people getting fucked, how's their hook group, Greg?
They're great. Not gonna say anything for now. There's some conciliation going on. I mean, I've basically washed them off already, but I've already pledged. I don't know if you saw, but any settlement money that comes out of them, I'm just gonna give it all to charity. It's kind of like it's, you know, blood money is an extreme term, but I've gotten so many messages from like former and current employees, where it's just like, Jesus Christ, like, what's going on in there? It's just awful, and I don't want their money. Yeah, sure, I want money, but I don't want their money. So I'm hoping that a decent settlement comes out. I'm looking forward to doing some good stuff with it, charity-wise, not for myself. Yeah.
You know what you could
really
do?
Nice.
You know what you could do, Greg, is donate that money to the London Met Police for their intervention program.
I could definitely give part of it to that for sure. Yeah. One thing that's funny is I keep seeing THG hiring people. I don't know how many people here in the UK even know this company. There's always like, oh, we have a new position, join, you know, an exciting time, blah, blah, blah. But it never says a growing team. Like, they're constantly hiring because the turnover is so bad. They have like a security team of like 16 people. They've replaced 32 of them in the last 2 years.
That's crazy. So the last podcast we did, there was an incident, right? So there was a guy who was involved with a tool that's probably, I don't know, 20 years old. And they like threatened me like publicly with a wrench, like publicly on Twitter, threatened to come get me. So these are the type of things that we deal with, like harassment. When you get to a certain level, things change, and I didn't expect it to be like that. So I have to be like really careful of, you know, who I let into the podcast and who talks and what happens. And it's sad, man, because, you know, I look at the industry as like a big family, right? So I'm close with Chris Roberts and Ralph Eshmandia and multiple people who I've been with for tons of years. But there are people out there, and I want newcomers to understand this, is that there are people out there that will target you because of your success. So just, you know, keep your eyes open and choose wisely who you communicate with.
Like, I feel blessed. I feel blessed because I look at like my personal network and, you know, personally and on LinkedIn, whatever, and most of the people, the vocal ones that I noticed, they're all freaking great. You know, most of them are really, really great. I know Lisa's had some problems. Oh yeah, she's got trolled like heavily.
Crazy.
But I don't understand why people do this, right?
Yeah.
Mike, in your case, the guy threatening you, that is totally not acceptable. It really isn't.
With a wrench.
And what's surprising is that somebody threatens you like that, and it's either because they're either jealous or whatever, or they really don't have a clue who you are. Yeah. You know? I mean, on the backlash, you could, if you wanted, you could make that person's life really difficult for them if you wanted to, you know? But on the other hand, when I speak to people, my thing is always, if you're going to have a chat with somebody, you're never going to agree with what what they all say. But, you know, we have a difference of opinion about games, you know, but we have a sensible discussion about it. You know, we just talk about it. You put your point forward, I put my point forward. We don't agree. Fair enough, you know. But if you're going to put something forward to somebody, always put something forward that how would you say, constructive. You know, don't dish somebody. If you don't like something that somebody says, either just say, well, okay, I don't agree with your opinion, but always try and say, well, I don't agree with it because of this, so I think this would be better, or whatever. You know, if people would do that, it would be a whole lot better. And Greg, to you, the stuff that you've been putting up with recently, I mean, again, that's completely not acceptable, but it also says a lot about the culture in the company. And I've worked in oil and gas, and oil and gas have a really bad culture, right? They actually blacklist people if they don't like you.
Yep.
Wow.
You know?
I mean, to be honest, like I've got some big surprise I had was, did I see that William Price is on this call actually?
Yeah.
Yes.
So William was kind enough to invite me to speak on something, and like I don't know who it was exactly, but you know, other I don't know if it was other participants or speakers, whatever. You know, started saying, you know, that there was like I was like anti-LGBT and this and that and sexist and misogynist and all this stuff just to try and get me pulled off there. And I'm like, and that was from like people within the security industry. So there's definitely people out there. Some people, I think they don't even realize that they're doing it. They just become very kind of polarized politically on one topic, and they can't see, you know, the forest from the trees. And if someone says something objective, you know, as soon as someone says something that's objective as opposed to their specific way of looking at it, then, oh no, you're not with me, so you're against me, so you're evil, you're the bad one. And they just, it's, you know, black and white for them. Binary
You can't have people saying that, you know, to you. You know, everybody will have different opinions. But I think in some of the stuff that I've been hearing, I mean, you know, people have been saying, no, we're not going to do anything about it. I think in some cases, some of these people maybe need to be named because other people need to realize what they're doing so that people can become aware of it, maybe before it happens to them, or to make it aware that maybe people have maybe seen this person in one light, and then they've got another light that they've directed towards you or to you or to, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
But you cross into a dangerous situation when you do that, though, because the person I'm referring to comes from a hacking group, right? So
Holy shit.
When you try to bring that person forward,
they'll go and attack you.
It starts a battle war. And I don't know if you've seen like the documentary Hacker Wars, like it could literally spur like some really bad shit.
Oh yeah, I understand that. This is what I'm saying. I could really see how, you know, like I was saying with your one, you could go and attack that person, you know, literally, you know, and things. But you know, I'm not saying you would, but I'm just saying, you know, because you've got the skill set, you can. And these people that you're talking about would be the same as well. They would have the skill set to be able to do that.
Right.
But I think in some of the places that you see, like just generally, not thinking of it, but like in the security industry, the people that work, as you were saying before, people in the positions, right? A lot of the stuff that I see is people have become ingrained in a position. So they don't move forward, but they're also there to, like in oil and gas industry, you probably saw my comment earlier, it's basically oil and gas industry, the creed is cover your arse, you know? So you cover yourself for anything that goes on. So basically if something comes down on you, slips off of your shoulder and falls on somebody else. Yeah. Right?
But when you're a speaker and you have a public presence, I guess, it takes one person to ruin somebody's reputation, or to cause people to like think about, you know, situations. So those are like, you know, you really have to maintain and have a circle of trust around you to look after what's going on.
You have to trust everybody that you feel close.
So the CIA, when the CIA goes into like a theater, right, they have trusted individuals and assets that they control. Same thing with the hacking community. When I started with Anonymous, I had people around me who monitored communications that may have been like negative towards me or threatening towards me. And I do the same now because now I have public presence, and same thing. You know, I get a threat, I have to deploy people to watch my back. And it's sad that we do that in our industry, but that's the tall poppy situation for the industry. I'm going to step out for a second. Greg, you can answer any questions you want, or you guys can talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
That's all right,
Yeah, for me, it was, you know, just finish, kind of expand on what I was saying before. Like, I think, I mean, we have a great community overall, but I think it's we surround ourselves without realizing with people who are, with the people we want. I try to make an effort to not, normally you say like-minded, but I try to make an effort not to be only with the like-minded. I like to connect with people from other industries and stuff as well. But there's definitely some people out there who are very defensive, very bitter.
I think there's a lot of people who are jealous. Like if you hold a position, or if you get a position. And I think probably your thing with THD, I think probably comes under this, where you come in, you join a company, and then somebody in there feels threatened by you. And they seem to think, you're coming to take their job or get rid of them or whatever. And it's like, well, no, you've been brought in to do a job. And the whole point is when you join a company, you want to be working in a team where you can trust the people you work with. You don't want to be covering your back with the people you actually work with.
Yeah, it's funny because I knew some of the internal politics, and it was a bit weird. And so there's one person there in particular. And I always joked, like, long before I was even interested in working for the company, but just knowing about the company, because they're quite big here, obviously, and knowing several people that work there or used to work there, you hear the stories about this particular C-level, and it's like, whose sex tape does he have? Because there's no way you would keep, this is like a company that's quite rigid about, you don't perform, you're out. Like, they don't tolerate slackers or poor performance, and they're quite draconian about it. And this person just, everyone says that they're awful. And I had my second interview with the co-founder of the company and the CFO, and we're like, you have serious cultural issues in your security organization. And he goes, oh, you mean, and the guy's name. So it's like, how is it that everyone in, every C-level person in the company knows that this guy's really, really bad, but he's still there? And when I was first approached, I was like, I don't want to come work for you guys because you already have someone in charge of security. And I hear terrible things, and I want to be able to set the direction, and I don't want to be, subvergent to his culture or whatever. Like, I want to be able to change things. I want to be able to take care of my people, of the people who automatically become my people, in my own way. I want us to be able to, do what I think is right. And I just don't feel like I'd be able to do that. And THG's own recruiters were like, yeah, actually, we recognize that. That's why we're kind of looking for a group CISO type thing to control this person. So like, well, why do you need someone to control them? It was a question that hadn't really dawned to me at the time. But the more I hear about how this person got there, the nepotistic relationships, the abuse, the bullying, all this other stuff, and how the turnover is just absurd when this person just keeps being protected.
Seen that here up in the oil and gas industry with management like that.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is how has that person managed to retain their position when clearly would be losing staff hand over fist.
They're losing more than that. I heard of the CISO of one large retail group tell me that they were going to host all their brands on THG's platform, and then they did their due diligence and started talking to them, and they backed out of a $10 million a year deal because of just how bad the security was. And I've heard like other people in the SOC just like, we like bring more like basic things like we should have a password policy, and the CISO didn't care. Like, he doesn't have the first, not my words, it doesn't have the first clue about running a security organization.
Right. So I had firsthand experience with oil and gas and how bad it really is. The oil and gas industry as a whole is probably infected with the most ransomware and the most backdoors than any industry I've ever seen. I scanned probably 100 ocean-based platforms that had Mimikatz on the platforms. Yeah. And I was giving the explanation of, sometimes we use that for password breaking, or if someone forgets a password. But what they don't understand is I can access Mimikatz and do my own shit. So the oil and gas industry as a whole is so far behind the curve of security that I spent most of my time filling out reports and dealing with law enforcement as far as child pornography goes. Like, it's horrible.
Yeah.
That's industry wide.
I told you that.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And again, this goes all the way back to probably when PCs first appeared. So we're going back to the 80s. And the popular thing used to be, obviously, people would email porn pictures to each other and that sort of stuff and things. And at the end of the day, it's a culture that's become embedded. And now I think it would be exceptionally difficult to get rid of it, without treading on a lot of toes. Well, and unfortunately, a lot of people in the oil and gas are known to be quite vindictive if you get on the wrong side of them. Like, as in, if your face doesn't fit.
Yeah. So I have a unique story about oil and gas as far as how they treat their employees. I was sent over to the UK to build a SOC, buy a flat. They were paying for everything, and then midstream decided, one, we didn't authorize it. Two, I don't know what you're talking about. And three, you're stuck there. So they quit paying for my flat. The security department that I was working for ended up dissolving midstream. So I had to find other ways to survive. And that's where I got into speaking and actually got involved with the community. But, it's funny, like we talk about CISOs, right? So the CISO I was working for would get on the phone with clients and say, or potential clients and say, oh, I've been working cybersecurity for 30 years. And I'm like, dude, you cannot claim cybersecurity for 30 years.
That doesn't existed.
That would be 1970. We're talking like punch cards, bro. Like that didn't happen. But that's what I dealt with. And he was so...
It wasn't called that. It wasn't even called security.
No, so he was worried about losing his job. And he claimed that he worked for the NSA at the same time my father did. I cross-checked that with my dad, and my dad was like, no, I know nothing about that. So, there's a lot of fake credentials in oil and gas, and there's a lot of people who are really book smart. Like, I give them that much. They're really, really book smart because the budget's there for training. But when you put them behind a monitor and a SIM or an AI platform, they fail. Going back to the interview I had with a CISO for a DoD contractor, I asked him what platforms they worked with. And he said, oh, we used to work with Darktrace. And I was like, oh, well, great. I know those guys, I've done some work for them. I've helped them like push their product and kind of mature it a little bit with my exploits. And he was like, well, it doesn't really help us. And it's, it's a POS and we're getting rid of it. And I was like, dude, I don't understand. Like, if you put that platform into a network that's already hosed, you're going to get shit results. Like, it's going to think that bad traffic is normal. So if you don't clean your shit before you put in an AI product, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things that like CISOs and different industries don't take into consideration, and they make like really spur of the moment decisions.
I gotta say, like my problem with, I don't know a single CISO. Well, I think one person that uses Darktrace and likes it, but it's just the email antigena part, which seems to be somewhat clever because it gives you some automated
option.
What's right, what's not. The other product, I only know a few people that have used it, and they've all torn it out.
Yep.
And their marketing is just absolutely ridiculous. Because first of all, I haven't used it personally, but for it to work, it's just like you said, like it needs to learn on something clean. Otherwise it's never going to work. That's one. Problem is they themselves market themselves. They don't say that. They just market themselves as it's AI. It's everything you need. That's it.
Yeah. So that's the funny thing, Greg,
and their sales
the chief scientist for Darktrace is actually one of the founding members of CCC.
Yeah, like I'm sure like the maths behind it is amazing.
Super smart.
But the
marketing sucks.
Yeah, it's because they're the first ones, the hooded hacker and all that stuff, and their salespeople are so. I think I was being chased by like over a dozen different Darktrace people.
Yeah, it's the salespeople. The salespeople at Darktrace are terrible.
And I don't understand how they have so many of them. It's like, it's mind-boggling how many people they have in sales.
Yeah.
And they'll harass you all the time. And if you don't talk to them, they'll start calling your team, and they'll start calling random people on your floor and your company, trying to even lying to get you on the phone, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I'm like, go in your CRM and put me as a do not call.
Yep.
And even then they still kept calling me, and I had to kind of escalate this. And I finally got it. And a few months ago, I was on a panel, and one of the people on the panel, she worked at Darktrace. So obviously Darktrace afterwards immediately went after every participant and panel member there to pitch them the product.
Yeah.
And this guy calls me up and he says, "Oh, hi, Greg. I see in our CRM that you're on like a don't call list because you've had some harassment from us in the past. I'm terribly sorry about this." And already I'm like, you're calling me, telling me that I'm on the don't call list. But I humored it because I'm like, well, he's apologizing for it. And then he pitched me. I'm like.
So what's funny is when I did, I think it was FOC Manchester, Darktrace came up to me and said, "Hey, look, we really appreciate you speaking. Have you thought about Darktrace?" And I was like, "Look, so that exploit that I just like gave you guys the document for and how to build it and how to run it, Darktrace didn't detect it. I ran it over port 8080, and Darktrace in the advanced search saw the traffic, saw the PowerShell, but didn't recognize it as potentially bad. So there was no like, they don't like to use the word alert. They like to use the word signature. So there was no signature for that traffic. They couldn't put together the insertion of the USB, going out to get a PowerShell script, bringing it back and executing it. Totally blind to that. So I worked with them for like a month trying to get them to understand that, that's malicious traffic. If someone goes outside the network to grab a PowerShell script, that should probably be notified and brought up as a high level alert, but it never was. So their product is really immature, but their research team is top notch and very open to like working with people. The problem is that if you bring, like I said before, you bring any machine learning or AI into a screwed network, you're going to get screwed results, period. And I don't know the answer to cleaning up a network to the point where you can bring in AI to make it legit. But right now, our industry is not ready for AI at all.
Exactly. Everyone's still getting pwned for like the most basic things. No one's done the fundamentals well yet. Yeah. Everyone's worried about, it's a pyramid of, the basics and the really advanced stuff and how much protection you want. Right. And everyone wants, that very pinnacle. And the irony is that the number of attacks, the really cool attacks that pinnacle protects you from, you don't need to worry about because first, it's so low because there's much easier ways of owning you.
Right. If you have me with a USB inside your network, you have much larger problems than my USB. And if you're accepting PowerShell from outside your perimeter, then you should probably not be an MSP. You should probably worry about your internal organization first. The same organization had 500 Eternal Blue vulnerabilities on their internal network and told me that, oh, well, it's okay because it's internal and it's not exposed. And I was like, well, guess what? You have a guest Wi-Fi in the lobby. I guarantee you I can exploit it right now. But yeah,
I've yet to see a company do asset management properly.
Dude, there is no asset management. Like DoD wide, we're talking like multiple, probably a couple hundred per command that they don't know exist assets.
Yeah, I would to the DoD's credit, they're starting to roll out Tanium, and I hope they use it well because Tanium is quite cool in that every endpoint with an agent listens around it, and it listens to ARP requests. So it's not a spreadsheet, it's not an import, it's not a ping scan. Anything that sends an ARP request to get an IP address gets detected.
Yeah.
Then you have to action. You have to identify what that was and load an agent on it or get it off the network.
Exactly.
So it gives you a string to pull on. But most organizations, at least 5% of their assets they don't know about.
Commercial
10,000 assets.
In a lot of cases, enterprise grade people, quite often asset management is something that's skimped on rather badly. The standard asset management, as you probably well know, is it's just a big list of all the computers in the building, names and who has them and all that sort of stuff and things. And quite often what happens is when things are in a rush or, strapped for time or whatever, computers will be thinged out to people without any sort of...
Not as bad as it could have been.
What was that? Go ahead.
But
I think we missed that last part.
Yeah.
From the iPhone.
Hello?
Yeah.
Whoever that is. Hello?
Well, Lucas, go ahead.
They're talking to you.
No, sorry, that's just feedback coming through my mic.
Oh, okay.
21st century problems. Yeah, no, I mean, if you don't have asset management, that means you got hosts, you're not configuring, you're not deploying right, you're not removing permissions on, you're not patching, you're fucked.
Yeah. And that's the bottom line. So I was talking to Arsenic earlier this week. We had a phone call.
I like mine. You have to guess what I have. I tapped the mark.
Right on. Right on. That's genius. So anyways, I was speaking to Arsenic about like some of our history and what he's gone through to try to correlate our story for the documentary. And he was talking about the hack Pentagon. Joel, can you mute for a second? So Arsenic was telling me a story about how the Secretary of Defense came to where he lived in Texas to talk to him about being part of Hack the Pentagon. They really wanted him involved. He didn't want to do it because, first of all, it doesn't pay anything. Second of all, he wouldn't get anything out of it. But they had him do it anyways, and he agreed to it. So he got on one lunch period at work and started poking around and found 1.5 million vulnerabilities in the Pentagon's network. And he went a little too deep into some of the exploits and some of the vulnerabilities, and they actually threatened to arrest him. So it goes back to the point of companies want to know vulnerabilities, but the key point is nobody wants to admit their baby is absolutely fucking ugly.
Yeah.
And that's industry wide. So when I go in and do pen tests, when I give them a report of 50 pages of your shit's fucked, then they fight back.
Yeah, they do. And I'm having the same. It's so much of it's about culture.
Yeah.
You can take an organization, and I don't know if you're. I've been dealing with some Germans lately, and maybe you're seeing this as well. Take an organization where. So this is not the Germans, but you take an organization where they've spent money, they've spent the last 5-10 years securing stuff. You go in there and you see, this is shit because you've not considered this, you've not considered this. This is, you say you're doing this, but you don't really understand how it works, blah, blah, blah. All these problems, they get defensive, they hide, they resist, they slow things down, and it's a pain. And you can go to another organization where they've done nothing. They have absolutely nothing in place, but their attitude is, yeah, we don't really know what to do. Please tell us. Even though they're technically 10 years behind because company A has started 10 years ago, you'll get these guys up to speed in no time at all, just because they're open to, they're not defensive about it.
Right.
It's communicating the fact that I'm not blaming you for this, guys. You guys are developers, you're infrastructure, you're data scientists, you're doing all this other stuff. I'm here to help you with the security part. You do your part, I'll do my part. We have to work together. I was like, great. We're keen to find out. We're keen to learn.
So that dichotomy, Greg, when you look at
accepting culture makes all the difference.
Yeah. When you look at the dichotomy in the security industry, right, and that type of issue, let's bring that into the pandemic, right? So it's nothing more than a vulnerability assessment. Nobody wants to admit the numbers. Nobody wants to admit the issues, right? But that's human nature, right? It's the survival. We don't want to admit vulnerability or issues because it makes us weak. And a lot of companies stick to that. They won't admit that they have problems.
Yeah, I've got my views on the pandemic. So much of the data is so heavily flawed, but politicians don't want to admit that now.
Yeah.
So we've got a PDR test that for every 100,000 people you test, you create 1,000 cases.
Yeah.
Even when nobody had it.
Yeah, and the Bluetooth, the Bluetooth. Oh my God! So when the UK came out with the application for NHS, and they were using Bluetooth for the, I guess, cross-reference of who's been exposed and who hasn't, I raised the point of, I can sit there and sniff Bluetooth all day and manipulate the numbers to the nth degree. And they fought that shit left and right and like deleted my post. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you don't want to admit that there's a vulnerability. I had a guy tell me there was no vulnerabilities in Bluetooth.
Yeah, I believe that. I think the culture that you get as well as within the companies is these people, like you described, Greg, have like done all their checks and they've hardened their system up and everything. But for a lot of people, it's a tick in a box. Well, we've done it. And what they fail to realize is, yeah, you've done it now. In 3 months' time or 6 months' time, there'll be more stuff that comes across and you go back down to do it again.
Yeah.
And go back down and do it again. And I think this is what people miss.
I'm okay with that though. Mike, I'm completely okay with having to go back and do audits and tests every 2 weeks. As a matter of fact, let's do it every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way you catch stuff because people seem to forget that.
Send me Bitcoin.
See, you're selling out, Mike.
We all have to make money.
You can't use them anywhere else, Mike.
Yeah. So let's take, for instance, my last pen test I did. I did it for a domain name registrar, and they said they had 20 devices they needed tested. EPP server, and just 20 devices. That was at 20 IPs. So I look at those 20 IPs, and those 20 IPs had 134 interfaces together. So what went from 20 IPs went to 134. On a contract I'd already signed for $2.5 grand for a week, and I had to cover 134 IP addresses for a domain registrar. So they take advantage of people. And the sad thing is that that's industry wide, and it has been around since I became a pen tester over 20 years ago. So the check boxes, the check boxes don't help. The compliance, meeting compliance, doesn't help because most of the time I do those compliance pen tests. They want to massage the results to make it look like they're not as bad as they are. So they meet that level of compliance for funding. And that's a problem in the industry as a whole.
Or they need to meet compliance in order to be able to work with other people.
Yeah.
You have that again in the oil and gas industry. You have to be a certain type of compliance in order to be able to trade with other people within the oil and gas industry.
It's easy to be compliant if you're secure. It's not necessarily easy to be secure if you're compliant.
Exactly.
Just go about it the right way, and that's all I care about now is I just want to build security programs that work, and that's completely different for every organization because it depends how they're structured, who the people are, what the culture is, what the resources, what the skill sets are. You got to tailor all that shit to make something that's kind of sustainable, and nobody does that.
But it
boxes.
Yeah, it really focuses on people. It's not technology. So technology rarely changes drastically. It's the people and process. So if you can audit that people and process, you're going to get 100% compliance.
Oh, your biggest issue just now.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll go upstairs. I'm sorry.
Two of the biggest problems. And what does it target?
No, go ahead.
Every single time.
So I wanted to cover something really
Losing
quick.
you guys a bit.
Yeah, I want to cover something really quick before the end of the podcast. So we may have a potential corporate sponsor that does automated pen testing. Hopefully we'll have like a sealed agreement within the next 2 weeks. At that point, like this will get a lot bigger. I didn't expect this podcast to like really boom like it has, but I'm like really impressed. And some of the people that we're going to have on, Greg being one, is really big for me. Hopefully we'll get Kevin to come on if he has time between his haircuts and like working.
Gym sessions.
But yeah, like I want this to be a collaborative effort to go over the industry and look at new ideas and ways to improve what we're doing. And I think we've done that tonight. So I'm going to leave you guys to it. You guys, ask questions, whatever. I'm going to sign off, and I'll probably shut this down in like an hour. But feel free to ask Greg questions as long as he wants to stay. And thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks
I mean,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to us, Mike.
Thanks, guys. It's
Thanks,
been
Mike.
great.
I was about to say I need to bow out because I may have told my girlfriend this was going to take 20 minutes and it's been 2 hours.
It's getting late as well. It's not midnight.
Thanks, Greg.
He's not even answering me on WhatsApp anymore, so I don't know what's up. Yeah, I'm happy to come back anytime Mike wants me to. I've got to get going, but by any means, feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And
Ready to go, yeah.
always happy to.
Yeah, Greg, all right.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Yeah, bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Night, everyone.
Yeah, need to go to my bed.
Thank you too, Mike.
Hey, hello Ryan, how you doing?
Good, man. What's happening?
Oh, not much. It's time to go to bed now. It's midnight here.
It's what about here? 10:55, nice and early.
Yeah, no, 12 o'clock. It's time where you sit, but this time I'm like,
I'm going to tap out.
yeah, I'm heading off to my bed now. Yeah, I need my beauty sleep and things. But yeah, it was fun talk and things.
Yeah, man, it's good. It's insightful, dude. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, I mean, there's lots of things you can talk about and everything, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean, I've been in IT for donkey's years, closing in on, well, I'm a big 5-0. Would you believe it?
Look at David, 21, mate.
Yeah. Thank you. But having seen it all, I mean, I've worked primarily in oil and gas up here in Aberdeen, and all the stuff they've described it's nothing new. It's been going on for years and years and years, and everything. And it needs to change. You need to be able to bring people in to do the stuff and accept that you don't know the subject, and listen to what somebody says. And true enough, you go and look at it, it's always just a tick in the box for a lot of places. Oh, we've done security. And then like, well, yeah, you've done security then, you need to do security now. And you try and tell people that they just don't want to know, And like you said, they'll try and dish you or get you dismissed, or, like they raise your comments and things. But then what they do when they raise comments like that is you'll probably find somebody internally has picked it up and claimed it, or they found it.
Now, how someone like you with so much experience out of work, man, like they cry there's this job, like a skill shortage, but someone with 20, 25 years experience like yourself is looking for work, man. That blows my mind.
It's hit a problem in the fact that there's more stuff comes along, and especially with the advent of cloud, and you initially had Amazon and Microsoft Azure came along, and there wasn't that many services on it. But look at their stuff now, the amount of services they have.
Yeah.
As that came along, I realized that what I do is like on-site support. So if I was employed by somebody, I'd be an on-site person and everything. Yeah. But as you get more and more cloud stuff, the on-site support is going to go from the low cloud to the cloud people, because if you get a problem, it goes to cloud people to solve. So eventually what would happen is an on-site localized person would eventually become a glorified note taker and things. So I realized that I needed to kind of move away from normal IT support try and make a move into cloud support or IT security.
Yeah.
And IT security.
You've gone for security? Is that where you're...
Yeah, IT security was the thing I kind of picked up on, because I realized that also with the way things were going, you had companies who then would have like IP. So for example, like oil and gas companies create items to use. So if they were creating an item, that's intellectual property. So somebody could break in, nick all the files, sell them to somebody else. That person could then fast track it through and gazump them to the market. And that company who spent millions to create it all would lose out on tens of millions,
Yeah.
So I realized that security needed to be changed, past the point of where the usual type of security was, you went to this thing and your permissions gave you access to various places on the network, blah, blah, blah. And as you saw more and more stuff coming, outside, and you suddenly realized, well, there's a lot more to security. It's not just internal now. You've got to figure out your perimeter stuff. How do you deal with somebody from outside?
Jason Street, he was on a podcast the other day, and he said physical security is just something that's completely overlooked with everyone, like concentrating on the actual, the traffic side of things. Like if someone just walking into plugging a USB stick in, like Mike was saying, boom, network owned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the ones that I did years and years ago, one of the companies I worked for was actual physical security of the building. What happened was we got broken into, but not because somebody physically broke in, into the building, like, smashed a window and climbed in and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. What had happened was the bloody cleaners who'd been in cleaning at night had left the back door sitting open. And the person just walked in.
Is that even breaking in, or I'm not sure.
And the funny thing was that I walked in the following morning, unlocked the computer room, walked into it, I looked around, it's like, that's funny. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't lock the computer room. I don't normally lock it because, it's in a place where nobody would think to look. I was like, okay. And then the first thing I looked around was, and the first thing I noticed was the 3 laptops were missing. And the reason the 3 laptops were there is because they were all faulty, right? Yeah. So, and that was back in the old days, where you could, like, your board inside your laptop was main board, and then you, like in the Dell ones, you'd have a clip-in graphics card and everything.
Yeah, I remember that.
Cards, So they were all waiting to get new graphics cards. Then at the same time, I noticed that 3 laptops were going. I noticed that the box, that the next bit for the telephony system was missing, so it had been under the table.
Yeah.
And the reason I knew was because it was a red and white box. It kind of stood out a bit, Yeah. So obviously the cops come in. I supply the cops with the serial numbers, make, model of all the machines, thingy. And the next thing I then do is I contact Dell to tell them that these machines have gone missing. So if somebody contacts you for support for them, don't give them anything.
Yeah.
Following week, they turn up, they come back in. I usually got an evidence bag and one of the laptops, and it's like, yep, recognize that laptop. Turns it over, yep, serial number, definitely know who that belongs to. That's definitely one of our machines. Where do you find it? And they'd literally gone. The police had a list of people, who are known for petty theft and everything. And he says the reason we were able to identify him is because sitting in his bedroom was the red and white box that you'd.
So were they stolen for the data that was on them, or it was just a petty break-in, or what's the?
It's what we call opportunic theft.
Okay.
It's like if you leave a door open, somebody will sneak in and grab something.
Yeah.
Right? Basically, he wasn't in the building for any more than maybe a minute or two, and he slipped back out the same door because the cleaners were too busy cleaning around. And of course, the first thing I said was, well, how the hell did you get in? And the first thing I said was, ask the cleaners. I bet you they left the doors unlocked or open. And true enough, they'd left the back doors sitting wide open while they were away cleaning upstairs and everything.
Yeah.
And it was just, But like everything else, I mean, as I said, a whole lot more stuff could have gone missing if the guy had been, a determined thief, and the like. But I mean, there's only so much you can do with security. I mean, I've been through the swipe card scene and everything, and it's always the same fault that comes up with swipe cards. You ask people when they come in, and you explain to them why they need to swipe their card on the swipe card thing at the door. But the amount of times you get, so a bunch of people all arrive first thing in the morning, and the first person will swipe their card, and the rest of the people will just troop in. And then you go and run a fire test, and you get the sheet outside, and there's about half a dozen to a dozen employees not on the list. But they're there in front of you, and it's like, why are you not on the list? You didn't swipe your card in the morning, did you?
Man, I'm going to tap out. It was lovely to do.
Nice speaking to you.
Yeah, I connect with you on LinkedIn, so look for my...
Yeah, be my guest.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll speak to you again, because I'm going to sneak off as well.
Yeah, I'll be here every week, mate. I'm a fiend
I'll be
for
happy if anything else that might have got on the go. Been a while since.
Later, man.
Yeah, take care. All right. And
you, buddy. Take care.
All right then. Good night.
Good night.